Welcome to This Day Live, the Sunday talk show, where we discuss all things political, bringing you the top stories locally, nationally, and from around the world. I'm Ruben Abati, and This Day Live begins now. I'd like to welcome today's panelists, Professor Bola Akintenwa, Director General, Bolitac Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, Chike Ogia, former Commissioner of Information, Delta State, and Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's start with Nigeria, where former Chief Justice of Nigeria, Walter Onnoghen, has been barred from traveling out of the country. Reports suggest that the move is part of a fresh probe into Onnoghen's affairs. The former Chief Justice was convicted for not declaring his assets by the Code of Conduct Tribunal in April. An internal report issued by the Nigeria Immigration Service stated that Onnoghen, his wife and daughter were attempting to travel to Accra, Ghana, when they were accosted by immigration officers. His passport was flagged because Justice Onnoghen's name is on the watch list. The passport is currently, we're told, in the custody of the Immigration Service. Well, Chike, let me start with you. It looks like it's not over yet for Justice Onnoghen in terms of his travails. Is either the state still has a case against him, or they are likely to bring fresh charges against him? What is the indication of this? Because the impression that this conveys is that it constitutes a risk flight. That's right. Even when there is no, a flight risk, even when there is no case, ongoing against him, as it appears.
Well, you know how our system works here. And of course, this is the zenith of the judiciary we are talking about. The jury is still out as the methods that were used to getting rid of the learned Chief Justice of the country. These are very, very different times in Nigeria that even those of us in the legal profession, we don't even know what to think or what to believe. Because I thought the tribunal was already functus officio of that matter, in the sense that they had done what they needed to do. And he has stepped down as the CJ of Nigeria. Why then are they trying to impede his freedom to liberty and movement? I don't understand. If indeed there are new findings or new investigations has revealed some new things, because I actually read somewhere that maybe they discovered some offshore accounts he has or something. There are ways of garnishing these accounts and dealing with it instead of just embarrassing him, at the airport that way. But be that as it may, the truth is the law is no respecter of persons, we know that. And if there are new investigations have brought up new evidence or findings, exactly, then they should do the right thing and charge him before a proper court. Not, we can't keep on doing this, investigating, harassing people, trying them by media, all that, even before you bring up the case in court.
Yemi, what do you think?
I think that's, for me, the concern. I mean, if he was on the watch list and you don't want him to travel, why don't you collect his passport? I mean, one of Showere's bail conditions was that his passport would be submitted and he wouldn't be able to travel. So if you don't want the former CGN to be able to travel, make that known, and not then wait till he wants to travel and then make it a big song and dance. Because as you've said, there are no fresh charges, we don't know what the issue is. You just didn't want him to travel, and you could have done that in a different way. So yeah, I mean, trial by media, trial by embarrassment, using the powers of the state for a point that is needless, really.
But of course, you will agree that this is no longer about the judiciary and its independence. This is a matter between the state and Justice Onnoghen.
That's nothing to do with judiciary as far as I'm... Well, I mean, let me take that back. To the degree that his removal as CGN had to do with the judiciary, anything that now has to do with him, for me, it's still that. Because you're still trying to prove a point about the judiciary and what's going on with the judiciary and what powers you have of coercion as it relates to the judiciary.
Well, Prof, are we really in a position to make any definitive statements, not knowing the reasons, why his passport has been taken by the government?
Many issues are involved. The perspective of the general public in Nigeria is quite relevant. Even though Yemi and Shike will normally argue that, well, we shouldn't be talking about the judiciary. Well, I think we cannot remove the judiciary out of it. Why? One school of thought has argued that the presidency might have been angered, aggrieved, annoyed by the fact that Onnoghen decided to appeal against the judgment of the Code of Conduct Tribunal. So, why has the presidency been annoyed? The adduced reason is simply because the appeal court, even though it argued and accepted that the trial had been a fait accompli, that let the judgment be. But the appeal court made it clear, crystal clear, that the handling by the Code of Conduct Tribunal of the trial in itself was an issue. It made the point that Onnoghen had not been given good, fair hearing, and that, in fact, the Court of Appeal actually indicted the process that led to the conviction of Onnoghen. So we are told that the presidency actually had been much annoyed, and as a result of that, the presidency, the president in particular, was just waiting for his own pound of flesh to be taken. That is one argument. The second argument there is that, look, the generality of the Nigerian people now see President Muhammadu Buhari as a regime. They do not want to talk more about his administration, but about his regime, in order to make the point that, look, he's no longer respecting, the rule of law. Now, if, for instance, Onnoghen is traveling out, and as Yemi's point, very logical, very good, to say, look, if you do have any reason against Onnoghen from traveling, why not attach his passport rather than wait for him to be embarrassed at the last minute? So if you look at that one logically, it makes a lot, of points for people to look at very closely. What do you want to gain? Why do you wait until he gets to the airport for him to now be told that he's on the watch list? Watch list for what? If you have that one, please, you can attach, you can call for his passport. Then he knows well in advance that, look, he's waiting for either charges, fresh charges, whatever. But it's not proper to treat a senior citizen of this country anyhow.
Well, I get your point on that. Being a former Chief Justice of Nigeria, and by that fact, a member of the, the State Council, the Council of State. Your point is that he deserves to be treated with more respect, greater respect, because this could create problems of perception. But I guess in the course of the week, we'll get to know a lot more about what may have transpired, because clearly there is, a lot to be explained to Nigerians.
We hope, because, if we parallel it to Showere's case, picked up, charges. So
Well,
let's hope they honor.
Except that the circumstances are different.
No, but
and
it's the same
issues
thing,
are
because
different.
and I said again, we hope. If they don't give you an explanation, what's the difference? There's nothing. I mean, there's nothing that compels the government of Nigeria to explain why the former CGN's passport was collected. And that's my point. They can decide to tell you on January 1st. That's my point. There's nothing about next week that means they will do it.
But whatever is behind it will later come to the
Hopefully.
attention
Again,
of the
that's what I
public.
started with,
Yes.
that hopefully.
Okay, let's take another subject of interest. First Lady Aisha Buhari has accused a senior special assistant to President Muhammadu Buhari on media and publicity, Garuba Shehu, of making communication difficult within the presidential villa and with the public, meddling in the affairs of her family, and also complicating the activities of our office. The First Lady directly accused Garuba of showing disloyalty to the president and his family, and of redirecting his allegiance towards interests in the corridors of power, who she believes have been working to undermine President Buhari's administration. The First Lady named Alhaji Mamman Daura, a nephew of the sitting president, to be the principal beneficiary of Garuba Shehu's recent actions. According to her, Mamman Daura has been capitalizing on the actions of Garuba Shehu and his close association with the president to undermine the Buhari administration. Very serious charge out there. And I would like to start with you, Yemi. Do you think that, oh, you knew I would come to you. Do you think that this is, the tidy way to go about it, even if the First Lady has very serious grievances? Is this how she should address those grievances? Should she have handled the matter differently? And, has she been fair to Garuba Shehu? Could she not have, put the matter even differently?
I think what's clear is that as some have framed it, is that it's a cry for help, number one. Number two, implicit in her statement, public statement, is that she doesn't have the ears of the president, is what I would say. Because if it was an issue around authority, loyalty, and I mean, one of the things about Major General Buhari that people have said over the years is that he rewards loyalty. That people who have stayed with him over the years, that he's quite mindful of that. So if Mrs. Buhari is making a point about disloyalty, you would think that that's something that would interest him and he would want to take action on. But and there's quite a number of things that one can imply. One, her access to Major General Buhari. Second,
Access.
Her access.
Access to our own husband?
Yeah, some people don't see their husbands.
How could that be an issue?
Some people don't see their husbands. I mean, let's be very clear about that.
Really?
Oh, yes, indeed. So her cry for help tonight.
In terms of what? Access in terms of what?
You can, like, if you and I are walking, they live in separate...
They will still sleep in the same building, even if it's not in the same room.
Not necessarily.
Is he not going to eat?
Does she have to prepare the food? That's why he's a...
the official cook can be there, but he's supposed to ensure that the food is precisely what Mr. President wants.
But what if that's not the case? I'm just saying, let's not make... I'm just saying we can postulate quite a number. I don't live in their home, neither is she my friend, so I don't have first-hand information about what's going on in her home. I'm saying, but what her statement communicates is access. Because if the point is to let your husband know that Garuba Shehu is undermining his administration by taking orders from others, then your first point of call would be your husband to have that conversation. So I'm saying the fact that...
And if that fails, then maybe you come to the public.
And you want the public to
but
do...
hold your thoughts on that, Yemi Adamolekun. We'll take a short commercial break here on ThisDayLive, the Sunday talk show. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to ThisDayLive, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Still with me in the studio, Professor Bola Akintenwa, Director General, Bolitac Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, Chike Ogea, former Commissioner of Information, Delta State, and Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director. Enough is enough. Yemi, I come back to you. We were discussing the statement by the First Lady, Aisha Buhari, against Garuba Shehu and Mamman Daura. And you were saying that it's a cry for help. And that, this may be an indication of the failure of pillow talk, and lack of access to her husband. And I queried that, saying that why will a wife not have access to her husband?
I said it happens. I mean, she herself, in an article carried by the Cable, talked about that she doesn't have access to pillow talk with her husband. But I think so that's one point. Another interesting point is that for me, it fuels the flames about who's really in charge of the Nigerian government. That what is the president aware of? What decisions is he taking? Who's, quote unquote, that we've heard over the last 5 years, the cabal, as we would say. And then thirdly, I think it also speaks to also the issue of access and if that is really that important for this administration. Because on the Sowore matter, I think within 24 hours, both Femi Adesina and Garuba Shehu issued statements on the matter referring to each other, which then makes you wonder, as a cohesive team, is there clarity around communications? Is there clarity about a stand and what it is they want to, how they want to engage the Nigerian public? And I think lastly, what I find interesting about Mrs. Buhari's point, which is also very unfortunate, she's spoken out against social media and against, rather in support of the social media bill. So for me and quite a few others who had a good laugh after her statement on her, at her expense, is that the same social media that you want to gag, you now think it's an important platform to you, because she tweeted the statement herself. She issued the statement, then tweeted the statement herself, that you think is an important platform now to gather public support. But unfortunately, there's no empathy. So while it might be a cry for help, unfortunately, quite a bit of damage has been done, I think, in terms of goodwill that she might have had, that she no longer has anymore.
We're very high about the point that, Garuba Shehu does not work for her. Garuba Shehu works for the president. And if she has any grievances, she should go to the president, not to the public. Because even the public, we're just as helpless. Because we cannot determine who works for or does not work for the president of Nigeria. But
no, sorry, I need to speak to that. For me, the important, and I completely agree with you, but I think the important bit as a citizen that I take away from that is who is in charge of the government. Because what Mrs. Buhari says very clearly in her statement is not just about Garuba Shehu, but who Garuba Shehu reports to. And as you rightly said, Garuba Shehu's title is SA to the president. Now, if the person who's giving Garuba Shehu orders about what to do, who to obey, how to act, is not the president and is not someone who has an elected role or an appointed role in this administration, then it's a cause for concern, especially at the backdrop of, as I said, things that have come up over the last 5 years, ministers who have said or implied limited access to the president that has come out in terms of how the administration is structured. And I think it's not something we should take lightly.
Well, Chike, I'd like to take your comments, but, maybe you also address the point about lack of access. Because in the eyes of the law, you cannot talk about access between a husband and wife under the doctrine of the unity of spouse, because husband and wife are considered one.
Indeed.
Not so, Chike.
But as we know, the law and practice.
For me, I see these things very differently. And the most important thing for me when I looked at this matter is that very unwittingly, the First Lady has cemented Gaba's appointment with this cry for help.
Yeah, but she asked him to resign.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
To be honorable and resign, that's what she's saying.
By asking him and by the manner she has done it, nobody's going to ask Gaba to leave that job. Because if he does, the people are going to ask the president, is it your wife you're listening to? So like you rightly said, the most important thing that there's a vital communication breakdown between the husband and the wife. And that's why this woman constantly runs into the social space and, looking for help. I really feel sorry for her. I sympathize with her because she obviously is way, operating in a scenario that is way above her, that she doesn't even understand the full dynamics of what is playing out. I would counsel her to, try as much as possible to close ranks with her husband and see how she can stop, really embarrassing both herself and the presidency with this, her outbursts that she does from time to time.
We're really in a position to turn ourselves into a marriage counselors in this matter.
I'm just telling you the way I feel about what is going on. And exactly, it's also making a Mickey Mouse of our government at the same time. So it's not something we're proud of. It's not something that they should be bringing up at all. We have too many challenges in Nigeria. We have too many challenges. We have important issues that we should be looking at. And not, the president's wife, telling us some other man who, like you said, is not elected or appointed, is the one in charge of the government. The optics, the hearing, everything is wrong for this government. And like Yemi rightly said, there is a problem with the communication coming out of the villa. The first thing, look at the situation of the general thing that the Punch did. They said we are going to refer to him as Major General, which I noticed Yemi has started doing. Right?
Oh,
and
really?
Of course.
I missed that.
Oh, she did. When she was speaking
No,
out.
it's President Muhammadu Buhari.
No, she said
Major General Muhammadu Buhari.
But you see, the point...
Is that not his title?
Excuse me.
Retired.
Okay, retired, indeed.
Yes. Let me learn.
Sorry.
So the truth is that the first thing Femi said, my very good friend, Femi Adesina, oh, it's fantastic. He was a general. There's nothing wrong in that. Then the next thing Garuba said is that, what do they mean? They cannot say that. And, you know, so they are both playing hot and cold at the same time. And these are the two media aides, you know. So there's a major disconnect there. Well, and I think, you know, these are things that need to be worked out.
Prof, let me come to you, but I hope you are also not going to act like a marriage counselor. I hope you will just stick to the interest of Nigeria, the national interest.
You see, the Nigerian people ought to commend the First Lady for speaking truth to power. You see, she's a correct, a very good woman I admire for her attitudinal disposition to political governance in Nigeria. First of all, let's begin with the functional differences between a special assistant, whether junior or senior, and a special advisor. There's always a confusion there. The distinction is necessary in light of the statement of the First Lady, Aisha Buhari. Now, a special advisor is necessarily a political person, all right, who is required to advise and whose advice may be accepted or not. A special advisor necessarily comes from outside of the MDAs, generally speaking. Now, MDA, that is ministries, departments, and agencies of government. But when someone is appointed from within the MDA, he is called a special assistant.
No, right? Special assistant can also come from outside. I don't think the issue is about job definition.
I'm coming.
So I can't get the drift.
Gaba is even from outside. Gaba is not in any agency.
That's where I'm driving
Gaba was Atiku's media aide.
Please, hold on. You see, we need to make that difference.
Yes.
Even if some people try to confuse that, it's based on public service regulations. All right? I'm able to say this because when I was first appointed SA, I was called special advisor. But the moment it was considered that, look, NIA, Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, was under and still is the supervisory authority of the Minister of Foreign Affairs. So it was changed to special assistant to the Honorable Minister. So I'm saying this on the basis of empirical factors, and the public service regulation is there. Where I'm drawing attention to it is this. Garuba Shehu Garuba is senior special assistant. That's his designation. And the functional responsibility of a senior special assistant is to assist the principal in the attainment of the set objectives. Set objectives. So he's to assist in the achievement. So a special advisor will advise, will give comments on the basis of what is referred to him. Now, how is that one related to Aisha Buhari's statement when he says he's no longer loyal? All right. The issue now is that if you do not operate as a special assistant, in other words, doing precisely getting, you know, the objectives of your principal attained, then you are not doing what is correct. You are not doing what is relevant, what is required.
Who is the principal here? Aisha Buhari is not Garuba Shehu's principal.
Hold on.
So I don't get the point.
Aisha Buhari is saying that her husband, who God knows himself, that Muhammadu Buhari is the husband, is the legitimate husband. The protocol requires, on the basis of public service regulations, that you indicate who your spouse is, and only one. You can have more than that, but only one is officially recognized. the officially recognized spouse, husband of Aisha Buhari is Muhammadu Buhari. No, yes. So, so,
whereas she does not have a constitutional role, you assume that she has the right to speak publicly on behalf of her
please
husband.
hold on. You see,
I don't get Prof's drift.
Empirical reality is that the spouse of Mr. President, all right, has the duty to ensure the success of her husband, whether it is put in black and white or not in the Constitution. And empirically, we have the office of the First Lady. Empirically,
Which is unknown to the Constitution.
No, you are talking
It's
about...
merely a convention.
Look, the issue is that, please, in diplomacy, we consider an ambassador and the wife as one in terms of discharge of official duties. The husband is in the office. The wife is at home. So in terms of food diplomacy, reception diplomacy, the wife is directly in charge. But the Constitution does not provide for that. And the wife is necessarily paid an assistant to perform such duties. So when you are talking...
Prof, we need to take a short break on this matter.
No, but I've not finished. Okay, right, okay.
Yeah, if we keep stretching it, I don't think we'll reach a point of convergence in terms of views. But we'll take another short break here on This Day Live. Don't go away. Welcome back to This Day Live, the Sunday talk show, here on the Arise News channel. Still with me in the studio, Professor Bola Akintenwa, Director General, Bolitac Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, Chike Ogea, former Commissioner of Information, Delta State, and Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough. Now, Prof, you are still on this Aisha Buhari matter. Yes, but if you could just summarize it quickly.
I was trying to make the point that Aisha Buhari is quite right by coming into the open to draw attention to the challenges she's faced with. Because in any normal setting worldwide, there is the limit to what is private to a president, to the family. All right? We all know. To say that Nigerians should not know precisely what the problems of the first family is going through, I think I don't subscribe to that argument. So the issue is that she is indirectly telling Nigerians that there are problems, some of which Chike and Yemi had drawn attention to. Who actually is in charge of the political governance of Nigeria? All right. So we need to address that. Now, if he says that Shehu Garba is not helping the attainment of the set objectives of Mr. President, I think we should be addressing all that.
What happens? What if the president believes that Garuba Shehu is doing very well?
Let him then tell Nigerians.
And that he has been losing weight doing the job. Let's then see whether the First Lady is in a position to fire Garuba Shehu.
Let him talk.
But that's another thing. No, it's not in Garuba Shewu's place to be exchanging arguments with the wife of his boss. That would be indecorous.
No, let Mr. President.
No, the matter is too small for Mr. President to be commenting on.
No, the matter is not too small.
No.
For someone to lay claims to who is really
precisely
let's take another subject. The Controller General Nigeria Immigration Service, Mohammed Babandede, says the visa on arrival for holders of passports of African countries from January 2020 will accelerate African integration. Babandede says the decision will ensure the removal of barriers hindering free movement of people within the continent. He said the service is committed to high professionalism in delivering its services without compromising national security. The additional background is that President Muhammadu Buhari was attending, a forum, what is called the Aswan Forum in Egypt. And, in the course of his presentation at that forum, he announced that from January 2020, Africans, coming into Nigeria will be given visas at the point of entry. But this has generated a lot of concern. One, why did the president choose that platform to announce it? Two, Why were Nigerians not consulted? You know, if there are stakeholders, have they been consulted? 3, yes, this may be about African integration, but isn't there a contradiction in terms here? The same Nigeria that has been expressing concern about the influx of, nationals from neighboring countries and the porous nature of our borders. Why did we not address that first before, taking this decision? And then 4, I think, why the rush? Just about 2 weeks to 2020, why January 20? Why not address other challenges before arriving at this decision? Prof, this is right down your alley, you as a diplomat.
Thank you. I argued in my column today on the basis of observation that the government of Nigeria under President Muhammadu Buhari prefers to act before thinking. And I looked at many cases. It's the same pattern. When government does not think before acting, when the government refuses to think deeply before acting, only to set up panels of inquiry after acting, I think it cannot be helpful. That is precisely what is happening in this particular case of having to go to Egypt to go and announce. First of all, let it be clearly stated at this juncture that the idea of issuing visa at the point of entry started under Olusegun Obasanjo. The record is clear there. Now, Obasanjo proposed in response to many criticisms by that time that, okay, shouldn't we give 2 weeks to any visitor, any African visitor in particular, coming to Nigeria? Because criticism against that particular policy was very strong. And one major reason often given by that time was that Nigeria was not able to have an effective control over even the community citizens as defined under ECOWAS Protocol on free movement and right of establishment. On that basis, it's on record that Olusegun Obasanjo directed the immigration offices to establish offices immediately in the various 774 local governments to ensure that foreigners coming in are closely monitored. It was in light of the situation of insecurity that it was said, look, Nigeria was not well equipped to be able to control and prevent, especially terrorists from coming. Now, I drew attention to this as a preliminary information to now ask, has the Buhari administration, for instance, considered what informed the Olusegun Obasanjo administration from jettisoning the policy by that time? Why was it set aside? Have they looked into it? Are they now ready to respond to the foreseen problems by that time? The second level is this. There are different categories of visas. All right. The issue now is that unlike the 2-week period considered by Olusegun Obasanjo, if a foreigner is coming from a country where we do not have a diplomatic mission, now you can arrive in Nigeria and request for issuance of visa on the basis of a 30-day visa that could be given to you. But the main problem is that such people, you should have applied electronically, e-application.
E-visa.
e-visa. Now, if you have given all the preliminary information as required, and the security agencies have succeeded in clearing you, then you come with the documents. You must have been given approval by the headquarters in Abuja, on the basis of which you now arrive at the airport and they can now give you visa. But you still have another category that is relevant, business visa. It simply says that, okay, for as long as you can show evidence of adequate funding for the trip, in addition to the other requirements, there are 5 of them. Your passport must be valid for 6 months. Then you must have paid for the visa. The evidence of receipt must be given, and so on and so forth. Now, the issue is that how do you, on the basis of either physiognomy, determine when a visitor is not a terrorist? Because a terrorist is solvent enough, very rich, and he will show you the money laundering funds he has to enter Nigeria.
Well, Prof, quickly, let me bring Chike into the conversation. Chike, I guess you read this day editorial on this subject, which is very direct, pungent, and straight to the point.
Prof has outlined the categories of visas and all of that. That I don't even think is the issue now. If we go back 1999, I remember Professor Jerry Ghana. He was the first minister for integration in Africa. Olusegun Obasanjo, like he rightly said, actually carved out a ministry for that. I was then in the presidency with Chief Asiodun. And the whole idea at that time was that there was this need, for Africans to come together, especially after Mandela in South Africa and all of that. Like you rightly said, 20 years down the line, the continent has changed so much. We went into the free African...
African Continental Free Trade Agreement.
Yes. Shortly after that, all our actions are directly inverse to that agreement. And it's the same kind of situation we're looking at now. Because what the people on the other side are saying, just like you said, security concerns. In fact, some people go a step further by saying this is part of the Fulanization of the country, that they want to open the border so people can come from the Maghreb regions, boost their population up north, and then make the South totally irrelevant.
In any case, in Nigeria, we don't have an accurate census.
Yes, and we don't. And you see, so with all these kind of things playing out, everybody, you see, because the country is so divided, which I keep saying, so there's all these conspiracy theories all over the place.
But if we may play the devil's advocate, I mean, if I was a government spokesperson, I would say, well, this is a case of President Buhari again showing leadership in Africa, because you recognize that that decision that he's taken is consistent with the position of the African Union to see how integration in Africa can be accelerated in the next 50 years. In fact, there's talk about the African passport, okay? And at a recent forum this year, Aliko Dangote, the richest man in Africa, said that, look, he needs 38 visas. He needs visas to 38 African countries, and that's quite a burden for business. So these are justifications on the side of government. But do you see that positive side of it at all?
Almost definitely, but positive in the sense of positive that you plan for. I completely agree with Prof around the challenge of this administration in terms of acting before thinking. Major General Buhari, in going out of the country to speak about this matter, as you rightly said, questions around why announce it outside of the country, number one. Number two,
Anyway, let's take another quick break. When we come back, I will take your concluding thoughts on that. It's time now for another commercial break here on ThisDayLive, the Sunday talk show. Don't go away. Welcome back to ThisDayLive, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Still with me in the studio, Professor Bola Akintanewa, Director General, Bolitac Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Chike Ogea, former Commissioner of Information, Delta State, and Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough. Well, Yemi, you were talking before I interrupted you and, went on a commercial break. And I noticed that you again referred to the President Buhari, as Major General Buhari. You will recall that in 2015, there was an official statement signed by Garuba Shehu saying that the President would not want to be addressed as Major General, that he should be addressed as President of Nigeria and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. And that has not been changed.
And
I'm not aware, and I'm not...
Additional changed it last week by saying that that's his title and there's nothing wrong with it.
No, but there was another statement from the presidency.
Okay, so if they are confused internally, that's not my headache.
I'm not gagging you. I'm not gagging you.
I'm just saying it's not my headache.
It's President of Nigeria.
No, it's Major General Muhammadu Buhari, retired, as you rightly corrected.
President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces.
Major General Muhammadu Buhari, retired. When you speak about him, you can do your own. Let's focus on the matter at hand.
Before Yemi responds to your question, the appropriate way in terms of protocolar consideration is to say Major General Muhammadu Buhari, President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
You left out the retired.
No. Homo, before he died, even said, when you are a general, when you are a Major General, when you attain that particular level, there's nothing like a retirement, that you are permanently on duty for as long as you are on duty.
Anyway, let us not hold an editorial session over how to address President Buhari. Now, Yemi, quickly, your point about visa.
Yes, indeed.
As quickly as you can make it.
So you were saying leadership, and I agree with you that Major General Buhari would ideally be providing leadership. Unfortunately, you cannot provide leadership that you haven't thought through. And I think it's significant for me that even after he announced it, announcing it outside of the country, but secondly, the fact that not only did the National Immigration Service nor the Ministry of Foreign Affairs have, in a sense, a prepared statement to sort of follow up on that. Because ideally, if it was planned and thought through, immediately they could sort of follow up on the rollout of the process, the different types of visas, what processes they put in place. And I would submit that they were not aware that this was going to be announced, so they were not prepared for it. That's my submission. I have no fact to base it on, except for that theory. Secondly, as you also alluded to, we haven't done a proper census in over almost 20 years. Now, we have 5 different databases: immigration, driver's license, voter's card. So we don't have one solid database of who exactly is a Nigerian. What makes you a Nigerian? Yet we're opening our borders to the continent in this age of insecurity. So if you give me a 30-day visa and I overstay my visa, what happens?
They're going to overstay, certainly.
Who's looking for me? How would they find me? Our police are understaffed and stretched. Our military is stretched. So who is looking for...
There's no proper documentation system in Nigeria.
So,
short footnote to Yemi's point there is simply that as good as the policy is, we need to ask, is it in Nigeria's enlightened interest as at today? It's not. Exactly. And that is the issue.
Well, that last point, because I still want to take one more subject.
And the last point exactly is in the context of your point about open borders, the Fulanization agenda, the fear of that. And lastly, the CGN statement earlier in the week around amending the Constitution to include more clauses for Sharia. So if you put all that together, there are verifiable reasons for concern for such a statement. And
we will move on now, and we'll go to the United Kingdom, where the Conservatives have won an overall majority in the general election. The Conservatives have a total of 13,092,165 votes. The Labour Party, led by Jeremy Corbyn, won about 32.7% of the total, scoring in the process over 9 million votes. There have been forecasts that Boris Johnson will return to Downing Street with a landslide majority, and that has happened. The Prime Minister says this has already given him a mandate to get Brexit done and take the United Kingdom out of the European Union by January 31st, 2020. In his reaction, Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn says Labour had a very disappointing night and will not fight a future election after a period of reflection. Well, that's the situation in the United Kingdom. Boris Johnson says he will get Brexit done, and there is. He wanted to defeat Corbyn, and he has defeated Corbyn.
Yeah, but if you ask me quickly, I don't think it's about him defeating Corbyn. I think it is more about Corbyn grossly being underwhelmed.
Afternoon. This morning I went to Buckingham Palace and I am forming a new government. And on Monday, MPs will arrive at Westminster to form a new parliament. And I'm proud to say that members of our new One Nation government, a people's government, will set out from constituencies that have never returned a Conservative MP for 100 years. And yes, they will have an overwhelming mandate from this election to get Brexit done, and we will honour that mandate by January.
Well, you know, Prime Minister Boris Johnson there, now with a very comfortable room to maneuver and to settle down in office and to power.
Yeah,
Chicken.
Like I said, quickly, Corbyn lost the election. You know, he was there for Boris to pick up. And I congratulate him, and he's been persistent about the fact that, excuse me, he's going to get the deal done. And we look forward to him doing that.
Yeah, and he's promising a lot for the young people of the United Kingdom, and he's talking a lot about education, about equal opportunities, about the NHS, about security. Prof, would he get Brexit done?
When my brother Gomez was here and we were discussing this matter, I did not agree with his submission by that time. I had always insisted that when you are parliamentarians, you are representatives of the people, you do not necessarily always reflect or protect the interests of your constituency. Basically, it's more of selfish interest before you discuss the interests of your constituency. I was trying to make the point that the people of the United Kingdom, apart from the Scottish, who are looking at the possibility of independence.
The second referendum.
Precisely.
On Scottish independence.
Most British people believe that, look, there's need to protect British values and that they are for, Brexit. I drew the attention to the fact that 2 years after the British joined the then European Economic Community in 1973, January 1st, there was the first referendum on whether or not to continue with membership of the European Economic Community. Now, 2016, the matter was raised again. But the impression being given by the Parliament in the UK is that, look, people are frustrated, they do not want to leave. Now, with the election of Boris Johnson, now the campaign team is, get the Brexit done.
Anyway, before we go, I think there are also lessons that we can learn from the elections in the United Kingdom. I mean, in terms of gender representation, out of the 650 seats, you have women now constituting about 34%, in the House of Commons.
Increase of 2%.
220 of them, all women. Similar to what you have perhaps in Finland, where a 34-year-old is now the prime minister. And then, of course, I didn't see anybody snatching the ballot boxes. At the collation centers, I looked around, I didn't see thugs. And 650, constituencies, everything went peacefully, quietly, I guess. And nobody talked about the chairman of the Electoral Commission.
Who is the
chairman of the UK Electoral Commission? And I didn't see people giving out money, on election day. So,
but there was a throwback to the £3 when the Labour Party opened. This is sort of an earlier joke, but anyway, but you're right. The problems that faced us didn't face them.
Yeah, I mean, if we can learn the right lessons, yes, that will help us.
Our own problems in Nigeria are consciously, deliberately created. We know what we are doing. It's not that we don't have people with the relevant knowledge. We know. But we deliberately create obstacles there for the ultimate objective of ensuring that there's rigging. It's as simple as that.
And as for Mr. Corbyn, I think he doesn't need any long period of reflection. He should just step down, and Labour Party should worry more about a strategy for the future. On that note, we'll call it a day, and we'll see you next week. You've been watching This Day Live, the Sunday talk show Here on Arise News, I'm Ruben Abati. From my entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now, and thank you very much for watching.